Good morning. Today we come together for the solemn tradition of remembering and honoring the lives of those lost on September 11th terrorist attacks. It's a privilege to open this remembrance ceremony on behalf of ALPA's more than 80,000 pilots as we mark the 24th anniversary of the attacks. I'd like to welcome all the ALPA members, our colleagues from across the industry, our staff, and members of this community. This attack left a lasting mark on all of us, both as a country and as individuals. Through our tradition here in ALPA's Remembrance Garden and at memorials across this country, we share our pain, honor the lives lost, and keep our memories of this tragedy alive. In the days after the attack, we made a promise to never forget. Never forget the lives lost. Never forget the sacrifices made by first responders and bystanders who rushed to help in every way they could. Never forget that we must do everything in our power to prevent another attack like it. We demonstrate this commitment every day in our extensive work to improve aviation security. In the years following the attack, we fortified primary flight deck doors and created the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, which has trained and deputized thousands of pilots. But gaps still exist that must close. One such gap is the lack of barriers to protect flight deck during moments when the fortified flight deck door must be opened. In 2023, the FAA required all new passenger airliners to be outfitted with secondary barrier to protect us in the flight deck, fulfilling 2 decades of advocacy by ALPA and other aviation security advocates. Unfortunately, the FAA decided to leave this gap open for another year, caving to requests by the airlines. The barriers exist and are already installed on some Southwest aircraft. So the fact that we're dragging our feet to install basic flight deck protections on all aircraft more than 2 decades after the terrorist attacks is inexcusable. There should be no more delays, and airlines should install and implement these critical barriers before the deadline. We must retrofit existing aircraft with barriers so we maintain a uniform level of security across all fleets. As we remember September 11th, we must also pass down our commitment to defending against another attack. We're reaching a time where airline pilots may not have been alive in 2001, yet it is just as important that they continue to recognize and honor this legacy by prioritizing aviation security. This week, ALPA's commitment to security is reinforced at our Air Safety Forum in Chicago, where we are leading the discussion on security and safety of our airspace. Dedicated on September 11th of 2006, the 5th anniversary of the attacks, ALPA's Remembrance Garden invites us to carry on the tradition of being together on this day. The 10-ton center stone comes from a quarry just a few miles from a field in Shanksville where United Airlines Flight 93 went down. It's split to represent the fractures that 9/11 attacks created. Portions of the outer wall of the Pentagon and 2 sections of steel I-beams from the World Trade Center site are also built into our garden of reflection. Like the stone and steel before us, our commitment to preventing another tragedy like this will persist. At around this moment, 8:46 a.m., 24 years ago, our industry and our country changed forever. Lives, families, communities, and the United States were torn apart as our workplaces, our aircraft, were turned into weapons of terror. The attacks left us broken as a nation, but we rebuilt. We learned from the heroism of the first responders and the passenger and crew who fought back, especially on United Flight 93. We saw the worst in humanity that day, but through the actions of individuals and our nation, we also demonstrated the best in humanity. Today, we continue to mourn and heal. Through ceremonies like this, we continue to rise from the ashes. We honor the lives lost and acknowledge the lives still damaged by this attack. But we will not forget that it is up to all of us to support each other and make aviation more secure. So this can never happen again. Together, we vow to never forget the crew members, airline employees, and all those that were lost on 9/11 attacks. And through our work, our remembrances, and our resolve, we honor all those who died. At this time, ALPA United MEC Chair Captain Dewey DeHadway will share his thoughts.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today, we are here to remember the pilots, crew members, first responders, and fellow citizens we lost on September 11, 2001. On that day, the world was changed forever. We came face to face with evil, and it showed us humanity's darkest side. And now, 24 years later, there is an entire generation of ALPA pilots who have grown up in the shadow of that day. They never knew the world as it was before. For them, 9/11 is not a memory, but rather a defining part of the world they inherited. But how we choose to think back on 9/11 is up to us. We can and should focus on the heroes, the flight crews who stood tall, the first responders who ran toward the danger, the passengers who fought back. That's the legacy we must continue to uphold. We acknowledge the immense loss. Remembering their lives and their love is a part of honoring them. What endures is a legacy of courage, sacrifice, and unity. Let that be our promise to the generations coming behind us. With resilience and determination, we will carry it forward. For the families of the victims and everyone who lost someone, we will not allow the light of their courage to fade. We will never forget.
Thank you, Captain DeHadway. Our colleagues in Canada provide a lot of support to the U.S. and our members following the attacks, especially the crew members stranded in Gander. And now I'd like to ask ALPA Canada President Captain Tim Perry to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. It is my true honor and privilege to be here and stand before you again, to reflect on where we are, where we've been, and to offer a thought of the future that I hope we can share together. If there's one thing we can take away from the years following the darkest days, it's that there's always light on the horizon, as evidenced by our ever-growing unity, strength, and our willingness to stand in solidarity for one another. On behalf of all Canadian ALPA members, I want to reiterate and emphasize what we share in common and how, in addition to being forever joined as neighbors, we are joined by our noble profession and everything we have in our lives worth fighting for. On this day, we have come together to remember and honor the senseless loss of those who perished 24 years ago this morning. The events of September 11th are still fresh in our minds, as they must always be. And while today binds us together in the memory of those who fell, today also makes us recall our own personal memories, something a little different for each of us. Memories that, while unique to each of us, drive us to be together and to act together. That is why I want to take this opportunity today, not to speak about the horrors of the past, but instead to speak of our answer to it. Our answer is the continued, undying efforts in service of our noble profession. Our answer is the strength and unity that we must always nurture in ourselves and in one another. Our answer is continuing to demonstrate our resilience in the face of any challenge together. Yes, we must take the deep sadness and anger that I know we all still carry and use it to remember that it is our unity that is our strength, and that if we choose, nothing and nobody can take it from us. When we face our pain that way, it shines an unmistakable light on the goodness of the people who share our values of peace and freedom. While we will never forget the pain, suffering, and chaos caused 24 years ago, today I am confident that we will continue to reflect upon the past, learn from it, grow from it, and impart upon the next generation that in the face of evil, we must remain vigilant, we must remain strong, we absolutely must remain united, and we must cherish the life we have the opportunity to live and share with those we love. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Perry. I'd now like to honor the crew members and employees who were lost in the attacks. Captain Wendy Morse, ALPA First Vice President, will lead us with a traditional toll of the bell as each name is called. Airline pilots honor the memory of United Flight 93, Captain Jason Dahl, First Officer Leroy Homer Jr., Flight Attendant Lorraine Bay, Flight Attendant Sandra Bradshaw, Flight Attendant Wanda Green, Flight Attendant Cece Lyles, Flight Attendant Deborah Walsh. United Airlines Flight 175, Captain Victor Saracini, First Officer Michael Horrocks, Flight Attendant Robert Fangman, Flight Attendant Amy Jarrett, Flight Attendant Amy King, Flight Attendant Catherine Labore, Flight Attendant Alfred Marchand, Flight Attendant Michael Thoreau, Flight Attendant Alicia Titus, Customer Service Representative Marianne McFarlane, and Customer Service Representative Jesus Sanchez. American Airlines Flight 11, Captain John Oganowski, First Officer Thomas McGinnis, Flight Attendant Barbara Arestigui, Flight Attendant Jeffrey Coleman, Flight Attendant Sarah Lowe, Flight Attendant Karen Martin, Flight Attendant Kathleen Nicosia, Flight Attendant Betty Ong, Flight Attendant Jean Roger, Flight Attendant Diane Snyder, and Flight Attendant Madeline Sweeney. American Airlines Flight 77, Captain Charles Burlingame, First Officer David Charlevoix, Flight Attendant Michelle Heidenberger, Flight Attendant Jennifer Lewis, Flight Attendant Kenneth Lewis, Flight Attendant Renee May. At this time, I'd like to invite Captain Sean Creed, ALPA Vice President Administration Secretary, and Captain Wes Clapper, ALPA Vice President Finance and Treasurer, to place a wreath before the garden stones.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Today, airline pilots and all of us gathered here share a tradition of remembrance. On behalf of the pilots and staff of the Airline Pilots Association International, thank you again for being part of this morning's ceremony.